I was working as a seasonal park ranger in a national forest in Washington state last fall. It's the type of location where your radio crackles more than it speaks and fog thickens between the trees. It was just another usual afternoon. I was the only person assigned to Firewatch Tower 9, a distant observation post situated to top a ridge and utilized only during seasons with a high danger of wildfires. Things had calmed down, and the weather had cooled by late October. I mostly just patrolled a few hiking paths and recorded any wildlife observations. After long walks, I was taking breaks, sitting inside the tower, when I heard a furious knock on the door. I looked at my watch and saw it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I opened the door to find a woman drenched in sweat, her face contorted in panic. She claimed to have seen something terrifying while hiking the trails, something that made her fear for her life. When I pressed her for details, her hands began to tremble, and her voice quivered as she replied, "There's a woman along Ridge Trail. She's screaming, but not yelling." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Her mouth is wide open in a scream, but she's silent," she explained. "I don't know. Please come with me." I initially thought she might have just spooked herself, given she was alone in the woods, causing her traumatized mind to make little sense. As darkness was approaching, I grabbed my flashlight and followed the hiker back into the woods. I asked her if she got hurt. She responded, "No." I was a little relieved that there was no medical emergency at the moment, because paramedics would take time to reach here for help. We walked for about 10 minutes until we reached a clearing. She pointed to a tree and said, "There, this is where I saw her," but there was no one around. The soil in this area was pretty soft, so I started checking for footprints. I scanned the area with my flashlight, checked the tree line and called out a few times, but there was no sign of any person around. I looked back at the hiker and asked, "Are you sure? Maybe you saw a shadow or an old tree. It happens sometimes when you roam alone in the woods." She started crying. "I swear to God I saw her. She was just standing right here." I told her I believed she saw something, maybe even someone, but there was nothing here. Now I encouraged her to take the trail back down and head home. Best not to dwell on it. These woods play tricks. She didn't say much else, just walked away. I watched her walk back as she talked to herself. She was trying to convince herself that maybe it was something else, but deep down she sounded terrified. I was glancing back down the trail every few seconds until the fox swallowed her, woman or no woman. As a park ranger, it's my duty to inspect suspicious activities in these woods, so I decided to patrol the area once before heading back to the tower. I decided to double-check the hiker's story. Sometimes, dangerous criminals hide in these forests, so there was a chance the hiker had actually seen someone. As I walked down the same trail, I swept my flashlight across every shrub and bush. The first few minutes felt normal, but then I suddenly got an unsettling feeling, like someone was moving right behind me. I heard the crunch of dry leaves to my right and immediately spun around, but saw no one. I could sense someone following me, yet every time I turned back, I was alone on the trail. Once or twice, I caught what looked like a figure slipping between the trees, but it was always gone before my flashlight beam could land on it. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees, my nerves were frayed. The forest had gone too quiet. No wind, no bugs, just the sound of my boots and that spine-chilling feeling. I picked up my pace and headed back toward the tower. When I reached the clearing, I felt instant relief. Tower 9 stood ahead, the only silhouette above the trees. I climbed the hill quickly, eager to get inside, but as I got closer, I stumbled and stopped. A woman was sitting under the stairs. Her tangled hair was hanging over her face. Her clothes were torn in places, her skinny arms wrapped around her knees, and she was rocking back and forth, breathing loudly. It was so loud that it almost sounded like she was growling. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She didn't answer, didn't even look up, just kept rocking, and I stepped closer, aiming my flashlight at her. Ma'am is everything. She slowly lifted her head. Her mouth was open, not just a little, but rather too wide. Her jaw was locked in a scream, but no sound was coming from her. Her body trembled with each breath, as if she was trying to scream, but had forgotten how. She remained in that state for a few seconds before her body suddenly jerked. She stood up like a puppet, controlled by an invisible force, then tilted her head to the side, her mouth still wide open. Her eyes, which didn't look human, but rather copied, as if drawn onto skin, locked onto mine. She watched me for a solid minute before scrambling backward on all fours like a spider, disappearing behind the tree. I stood there in the cold, sweating profusely, the only sounds being the hooting of an owl and my own nervous breathing. Later that night, I ensured every latch and window in that tower was securely locked. I even called the base station, but the line crackled and died before I could finish explaining. They thought I'd imagined it, but I know what I saw, and now I keep hearing knocks on the tower door every night around 3 a.m., and when I look out, there's never anyone there, just the trees and the fog. I've been a park ranger in western Montana for over 8 years. In that time, I've seen my fair share of strange things: missing hikers, showing up miles away with no memory, distant towels that didn't sound like a familiar animal, and shadows that moved just out of sight, but nothing compares to what happened near Devil's Hollow last September. It began with a normal call from the main station. A group of campers packed up and left their site early that morning, around 2 a.m. One woman said she heard someone say her name. Someone else said she saw a man in the woods yelling and running behind trees, but they never saw his face. Devil's Hollow has always been known for its eeriness. Many locals believe it to be cursed. There are many old stories about ritualistic sacrifices and evil spirits lurking there, but I never really paid attention to them. Most of it sounded like made-up stories told around a campfire to scare tourists. So when I got to know about the campers, I figured I'd check it out. An hour's trek brought me to Devil's Hollow, a low-lying expanse of woods densely surrounded by pine. I knew this area intimately, having patrolled it countless times. I could navigate it blindfolded, yet this day felt different. About 20 feet to the right of the main road, a narrow overgrown path emerged, one I'd never noticed before. Despite the overgrowth, fresh footprints marked the grass, suggesting someone had walked there just that morning. Consulting my map, I confirmed my initial surprise. This path wasn't listed. It struck me as odd. Perhaps it was an old game trail or a hunter's shortcut. Curiosity piqued. I decided to follow it for a short distance. Immediately, an unsettling chill pervaded the air, a sudden heaviness settling around me. The trees grew, denser like they were closing in, and it was too quiet. Not just normal, forest quiet, dead silent, no wind, no birds, just the sound of my boots and breathing. Then I started noticing carvings on the trees, tally marks, groups of 5 scratched into the bark at shoulder height. Some trees had dozens. It looked deliberate, like someone was counting something, and then stopped. All of a sudden, about 20 minutes in, I started hearing footsteps. At first I thought it was just an echo, my own steps bouncing off the trees, but then I realized it was slightly off just a beat behind mine. When I stopped, the footsteps stopped too. When I moved, it began following again. I looked back a few times, checking the tree line, but saw nothing. I tried the radio, and only static was heard. I was thinking about heading back when I found this old camper van half sunken into the earth and covered in moss. It looked like it had been there for years, but there was no reason for it to be out here. It wasn't on any record, and no one can just abandon vehicles in the woods. As I went in, I saw a man curled up in a dirty mattress. Inside of it, he was sickly and thin. His skin was filled with rashes. I thought he was dead at first. Then his eyes popped open, and he quickly sat up. He gasped when he saw me. "You found me," he choked out. You can see me." I stood there, dumbfounded. Of course I could see him. He was dressed in a tattered, worn-out park ranger uniform. His name tag was difficult to read, but I recognized the name. He was a guard known for being unseen and unheard. For 6 months, everyone had believed he was lost on a snow patrol, missing for weeks. Search teams looked. They didn't find anything. There were no tracks, gear, or even boot prints. I helped him get down. He was so weak that he could hardly stand. His face showed both fear and happiness at the same time. I couldn't find the way back. Every time I tried, the forest moved. Trails led nowhere. I thought I was dead. We started walking back together. He leaned on me the whole way, stumbling. We were heading back when a faint whispering voice echoed from the trees. "Help me." We both froze. Silence lingered for a few seconds. Then the voice was heard again. "Please help me." I turned, aiming the flashlight into the fog. A man grabbed my arm hard. "Don't answer 'em, they're not real. It mimics people. It pretends." "What do you mean?" "I don't know, but it's in the forest. It watches and it doth." But before he could finish his sentence, his body started shaking violently. He fell to the ground, coughing. Blood poured from his mouth. I backed up yelling, What's happening to you?" "Oh my." A cut, his back arched, and then his head twisted around completely backward. His face was still looking at me. He stood like that for a few seconds, then collapsed on the ground. He wasn't moving anymore. I radioed for help again. This time the signal cut through. Rescue arrived an hour later. His body was taken, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. There were no visible wounds, and the cause of death remained unidentified. When I provided his name, the officer appeared stunned. I recounted details about the trail and the truck, prompting him to dispatch a search team. Upon their return, they reported no sign of a trail, dismissing my account as the ramblings of someone who had found a dying drifter. However, I know what I witnessed, and I know who that man was. Locals whisper that the forest near Devil's Hollow is cursed. They speak of an entity within the woods that conjures false paths, mimics voices, and lures people in. Once trapped, it refuses to let them leave. I no longer patrol that area, and ever since that night, I've been haunted by a voice just beyond the tree line, outside my cabin. Every few nights, it screams for help, but I never open the door. I'm a seasonal park guard in Utah. It's one of those big open state parks with sheer cliffs, majestic views, and lots of people taking selfies at the edge of death. Last year in August, we got a chain of reports of hikers going missing in the park within 2 months. 3 cases raised suspicion because there had been no storms or reports of wild animal attacks. All of the hikers disappeared, like fog into the park. The authorities didn't even find their shoes or equipment, and no bodies were ever discovered. Despite extensive searches inside the visitor center, we had a missing persons board with laminated printouts of names, ages, and their last known locations every day. I glanced at that board. I've memorized all of their faces, but had no idea what had happened to them. But something happened last week that left me in shudders. It was just noon on a warm Tuesday. I was on patrol at the park's most photographed location, the Canyon View Overlook. Imagine expansive cliffside vistas, barriers to prevent foolish people from plunging, and a large number of tourists posing as National Geographic with DSLRs. I was keeping an eye on the visitors when I saw this elderly man. Perhaps he was in his late 50s, dressed in a trekking vest and muddy boots. He carried a substantial camera bag slung over his shoulder, and his meticulously groomed beard gave him the air of a kindly grandfather. He was aiming a powerful zoom lens into the canyon, standing near the railing. It was heartwarming to see someone his age still so captivated by nature. I approached him for a casual conversation. "Getting any good shots?" I asked. He grinned. "I'm trying. The valley shadows are pleasant today, even with the sun so high." We chatted for a minute about his preferred photography trails and the weather. He mentioned he'd been coming to the park for quite a few years now. I asked if he lived nearby. He laughed in response, and from that point our conversation took a dark turn, so dark it made my stomach churn. You know, some of the individuals on your missing hikers board look familiar to me. I blinked. Oh, is that so? He gave a nonchalant nod. Yeah, that June pair hiking with the blue backpacks and that lone man in the red flannel. Did he own a drone? My eyebrows frowned. Those were precise details that only the park authority and the cops knew. There was no way anyone in the public was aware of it. The cops strictly told us not to disclose any of these findings, as it could hamper their investigation. How do you know all this? I asked without trying to sound too curious. He grinned once again as he glanced at me. There was something in his pale blue eyes that made my skin crawl. He brought his face closer to mine and just kept staring at me for a few seconds. Then he said, "You know, there are two kinds of people in the world. One enjoys watching crime on screen, and the other enjoys turning all that gore into reality. I don't think you fall into the latter." My hands started shivering because I could guess the underlying meaning in his words. "Which one are you?" He put his finger on his lips and shushed very creepily, then turned his camera bag over his shoulder and walked down the overlooked trail, as if he hadn't just admitted to something crazy. I stood there motionless and fear. Is he kidding with me? Or is he the one behind all the missing hiker cases? I couldn't brush it off, like just another weird interaction. I hurried back to the visitor center security room at Canyon View. We just placed a camera, not for surveillance exactly, but to keep an eye on crowds and cliff safety. However, he had captured every single visitor throughout the day. I retrieved the timestamp where I was talking to the man while standing close to the edge, but he was smart. He stood the entire time with his back to the camera. Not once did he look back, not even by accident. He seemed to have a perfect awareness of the camera's location and its blind spots. I could be seen nodding, pointing, and chatting in the video, and him a faceless figure that hardly moved. I went back to the edge, but he was gone. He probably became a part of the crowd. Now, I documented all I could recall, including his build, voice equipment, and the precise phrases he spoke. I called the local sheriff and told him everything. Once again, they ran their database trying to find this guy. We looked at the same area's trail cam footage, hoping there would be recording of this man's face, but no success. Two things have kept me awake at night ever since. One, someone who may be responsible for at least 3 disappearances is still visiting the park, and the second, he was aware of the location of the camera and understood how to keep his face hidden. I have watched enough documentaries on serial killers to know that many of the serial killers love visiting the places where they killed or buried their victims. I'm convinced this man harmed those hikers, perhaps burying their bodies within the park. Now older and likely retired from his murderous past, he revisits the site, cherishing those twisted memories. His sarcastic admissions and confidence about his crimes stem from the knowledge that only he knows the location of the bodies. To this day, it's chilling to think how many people escape accountability for horrific acts. I remain vigilant, though my hope of seeing him again is fading.